Republican Congressman Michael Waltz joins me now to discuss further. Hi, Congressman Waltz. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks, Pamela. And I can tell you very quickly, Disney World in Florida has been open now for months with no major breakouts. And in fact, I'm in Orlando now and am seeing, sadly, families from California, where Disneyland has been locked down, flying all the way here to Disney World. No major outbreaks. Our statistics are good. Our schools have been open since last August. So we all want to follow the data, but I would suggest a lot of these lockdown states are not doing that. Anyway,
okay.
Just want to, yeah.
That's fair enough. And we hear you loud and clear, and we're going to talk more about Florida and COVID coming up. But I want to first just start with what we're seeing happen across the country with voting rights.
Sure.
And just to be transparent with our viewers, it's important to establish where you stand on this. You have said you had issues with how states went around the state legislatures in this past election, but you ultimately did vote to certify the 2020 election results. So is it fair to say that you accept Joe Biden won the presidency?
Well, I think a number of officials, unelected officials in a number of states changed the rules just months before the election that in many ways tilted the election in Democrats' favors. But at the end of the day, what makes America different than so many places I've fought in around the world is a peaceful transfer of power. I think those issues still need to be addressed. Many states are addressing them now. And you know, but we have to move forward as a country. But to your point, though, you know, if what I keep asking is if many Democrats say the elections were just fine, no issues, then why do we have H.R. 1?
Wait, hold on. Before we get to that talking
moving
point,
through the House.
But I just want to get clarity on the question I asked you. This
Sure.
basic truth that American voters fairly and squarely put Joe Biden in the White House, yes or no?
President Biden is the president of the United States. He's the commander-in-chief.
Did he
we can
win
only
fairly
have one.
and squarely?
Look, I think there are real issues with the election, but he won it.
Okay. So, and just on that, as you know, there were more than 230 cases before the election. The battleground was set. And in some Republican states, Ohio, Texas, and North Carolina, they also went around the state legislatures as well. Those, of course, were states that Trump won. But I'm just honing in on what you said, kind of what you laid out earlier.
Yeah, I mean, Pamela, we can relitigate the whole thing. But, I mean, there are also states, you know, you said Florida's tightening up its laws. But, you know, Florida used to be a laughingstock of elections. Now we had a very clear election because we did things differently in 16 and 18 and will continue to prove in 20. And so
Right.
I just kind of reject the premise that Florida is already tightening its rules. What it's doing is making it better. And I think if those other states do so, then we'll have a much cleaner and much more integral election going forward with voter integrity.
But, I mean, the bottom line is there are bills in the House and the Senate in Florida that are reworking the voting laws. I mean, Republicans in your state are pushing to add restrictions to mail voting and drop boxes. The one in the Senate restricts drop boxes totally, even though your governor... Hold on. Let's hold on 1 second, Congressman, because I do want to hear what you have to say, but I also think it's important to include this context. So even though your governor, Ron DeSantis, frequently bragged about how secure and fair Florida's 2020 election was. Let's listen to this.
The result of 2020, from an administrative perspective, was that Florida had the most transparent and efficient election anywhere in the country. Floridians of all stripes can rest assured that in this state, your vote counts. Your vote matters. Your vote will be counted. It's going to be transparent. It's going to be above board. It's going to be a confidence-inspiring process.
Okay, so in light of that, that was after millions of Floridians voted by mail, including President Trump himself. So why the need to rush through these new rules or put through these new rules on mail-in ballots and drop boxes if the election was so successful, as he said? Yeah,
that's an easy answer. Florida has been doing a very strict, a very regimented process of vote by mail for many years. We're very hurricane prone. We have a lot of seniors, and you have to request the ballot. You have to prove with your ID who you are. And here's the thing. We knew all of our numbers and all of our totals on election night. You contrast that with states who changed the rules just months in advance, with unelected officials. You know, for example, in Pennsylvania, had 10 times the number of mail-in votings. In New York, they couldn't even settle. They couldn't even settle a congressional election. Hang on, I let you, Pamela. I'll let you ask. Please let me answer.
I just have to fact check. Go ahead.
But no, please. I'm happy to go an hour with you and fact check. In New York, the facts are because the system was overwhelmed with mail-in voting, because election officials were pushing it, they couldn't get a primary, a Democratic primary, counted for 6 weeks. So I think this notion that states don't have the right to improve their elections over time is just a fallacious one. But I would, if I could, want to ask about why then the Democrats, if everything's fine, want to make all states perform their elections the same with H.R. 1 and include things that just don't make sense. Dropping the voting age to 16. Do we want teenagers voting? Banning any state. Banning any state from requiring ID. You know, I have to present an ID to get cigarettes or beer. We certainly should for the integrity of the vote. So if everything is fine, why are the Democrats cramming this? And I can tell you what's going on in Georgia is about politics. They're gaslighting these changes. They're gaslighting these improvements and fear-mongering, calling them racist, calling them Jim Crow, so that they can then justify getting rid of the filibuster and then cram through H.R. 1,
well,
which will make it the nation
vote like California.
That's a big stretch there.
You heard the governor say there was a crisis of confidence in all these issues based on a manufactured lie that the election was stolen. There were multiple recounts in Georgia. I mean, both sides have their arguments about the bill. I just interviewed Gabriel Sterling, Republican, in the Secretary of State's office last night, and he conceded that, yes, I mean, had Donald Trump not lost Georgia, they probably wouldn't have done this. He said there was a punitive measure in the bill against the Secretary of State's office.
No, he said that. I watched that, Pamela. He said that about one specific issue on his office.
And I said that. I said that.
Right.
I said that.
One specific issue. But Gabriel and Kemp were the same officials CNN and the media and others were lauding when they pushed back on Trump. But now this is a crisis, and now this is voter suppression, and now this is racist. So I think there's a little bit of talking out of both sides of our mouth on this one.
Well, and I'm not taking a certain position. I'm just looking at the facts here, and there are a record number of bills being passed through Republican legislatures, which they have the right to. Hey, they were elected into office. They have the right to do that. I am not saying that.
And through the Democratic-led Congress, right? So as their number one priority, their first bill, not immigration, not health care reform, not transportation, their number one priority, and if everything is fine, then why do they want to so dramatically change the way the entire nation
If
votes?
Everything is fine, then the same question would go, and I want to get to COVID and China too, but the same question would go again in Florida, where if it was so great, where you guys have been doing mail-in ballots using drop boxes for so long.
Florida was a disaster. Florida was a disaster years ago.
Years and years ago,
you guys, you've improved every time.
So then why? Okay. So anyway, we could talk about that. And by the way, Pennsylvania in 2019, the Republican legislature passed the mail-in ballots there. But we must move on. I like a lively debate, and this certainly has been one, Congressman Waltz. But I want to go to China because in 2020, you called the coronavirus pandemic a cover-up by China, saying they unleashed this virus. So are you saying this was deliberate, and do you have any evidence to back up that claim?
Well, we know two things. We know, one, that the Chinese military is incorporating biowarfare, including gene crisping, into its military planning. And that's not from fringe elements. That's actually from the former head of their military science department and their National Defense University. And number two, I believe on your show, on CNN's show, Dr. Redfield is saying that he also believes it came out of the Wuhan lab, where we know they were experimenting, So what we also know is that the Chinese government disappeared journalists who were trying to be whistleblowers, disappeared doctors who were trying to sound the alarm, still haven't shared data with the WHO, would not allow the CDC to come in. So I think the Chinese government is absolutely complicit in a cover-up. if not in a serious accident at best that came out of its lab, and is responsible for the deaths of millions around the world. And then the irony is they're now leveraging vaccines and leveraging PPE in this kind of hostage diplomacy for countries who are desperately trying to recover. It's like the arsonist, profiting off of the fire that they started. It's really sad and it's sick.
And really quick, and we should know Dr. Redfield did propose that theory. It was his opinion. He did not provide evidence. I don't know. Doesn't sound like this is your opinion as well, not necessarily based on...
Well, I mean, I can't reveal. There is intelligence reporting and there is other reporting. And there have been a series of diplomatic cables for years now questioning the safety of the lab and knowing that this type of virus manipulation was going on in that lab.
So you've seen recent intelligence then to suggest, to support that theory then? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I don't want to go any further, but it is contemporaneous. And we know that, again, we know that the Chinese government, beautiful and amazing culture and people, it's an authoritarian government that is incorporating and experimenting with biowarfare as part of its military planning.
Okay, really quick, before we let you go, I just want to get your thoughts on the Biden administration today not looking to punish China over its handling of the COVID outbreak and also the Beijing Olympics. I know you've been on the forefront of boycotting that.
Well, to be clear, we have asked the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, to move it now for years. But given the cover-up of the coronavirus, millions dead around the world, and the sad, just the awful genocide that is going on in Western China, mass internment, concentration camps, a mass sterilization campaign of the Uyghur women, and what the BBC has now exposed is a mass and ongoing rape campaign. President Biden's Secretary of State has admitted it was also genocide. I just don't know how we put our athletes in a position to compromise their own values when you have over 1 million Muslims in these kind of horrific conditions. And how do we give the CCP, the Chinese government, this platform to basically whitewash everything that it's done and continue its propaganda? I think we need to take a stand, both on human rights grounds and for what they've done with this pandemic. Okay,
Congressman Michael Waltz, thank you for that
Pamela.
Spirited discussion. I appreciate it.
I salute you, and thank you for your family's service. All right.
Thank you for saying that. Thank you for your service, too. We appreciate that.